Hey nerdlings, welcome back to Comics and Cosmetics. I'm your host, Danny Sonsasi, licensed cosmetologist and registered super nerd, and we have another really exciting interview for you today. But before we go any further, make sure you smash that like button, torpedo that subscribe, and transport that notification bell to wherever you would transport a notification bell. I don't even know why I said that, but make sure you hit that bell so you get notifications whenever I'm back with another one of these awesome videos. Until then, let's get to the interview.
Be vigilant day and night.
Chase your tail light. I'll be under your skin, letting you go for a while. Then I'm taking you in. Your face like diamonds, a glimmer and punch. Shiny predator with a golden gun. Space age girl machine. 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 Space age girl
Hey nerds, welcome back to another episode of Comics and Cosmetics. This time I am very excited with the guest we have today. Ladies and gentlemen, nerds everywhere, I give you Mr. Dave Blass, the production designer of Star Trek Picard Season 3. Yay!
Thank you so much for having
Thanks for coming on. I mean, you're kind of a rock star right now, in my opinion. I mean,
me. And it's gonna, if that cost me $5 to tell you to say that, then it's worth it. But no, the season, the fans seem to like what we did, which is always a good thing. Season 3 was an amazing run, and we got to do a lot of fun things, and so it's been good times.
I cannot thank the entire cast and crew of Picard Season 3 enough because, I mean, let's be real, Star Trek was waning. It was struggling. And the fans were, I mean, Strange New Worlds was great. I love Strange New Worlds. But we just seemed to kind of be rehashing things. And we were losing the new stuff of substance that really sucked in the Trekkies, And episode 1 of season 3, The Next Generation, just hits you in the face. Like, yeah, how do you like that? How's that for Star Trek? And it was just stunning. Your work on this season is just stunning. It not only, gave new breath and life and made it feel like our Star Trek from the 80s had actually moved forward into the future, but it was just nostalgic enough. It had just enough of the, what was the space crate you called it? You still had that. You had the right lines. I mean, I would see things and shoot you a message like, what was that? I know what that is. It was just bravo.
Well, again, I think that the other shows like Discovery get a little bit of a bad rap because, they started out on a mission to do something completely different.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, we're going to do Star Trek, but like a different take on it, kind of a reboot. And they went into it like, we're going to do something completely different. And then they just got slapped in the face by the audience. Like, no, that was a bad decision. And then they go into season 2 and they're trying to, and it's like, okay, well, they're not. It's kind of feeding off the audience. I mean, I think that one of the challenges that the old Star Trek had was you got 22 episodes in a season to work out your kinks and figure out what you're doing and get everyone on the same page and what works and what doesn't work. And then you go into the next season and you get another 22 episodes to figure it all out and to get everyone on board and the writers and this and if you have a bad episode, it gets buried in the 22 episode. But then when you go to 10 episodes, it's a lot harder to do that and to really and then when you get the audience feedback, you're like, oh, they like this, they didn't like this, let's tweak that, and then they make adjustments. It's not as big of a thing, but when you're just doing 10 episodes, it's a lot harder. So I think that Strange New Worlds and Discovery both are doing amazing work, and we as Picard had the luxury of we were actually continuing the journey that they started in the Next Generation. So, I mean, I could have come in and really screwed it up and said, we're going to make it look totally different. And, that looks so dated. And I'm like, no, let's just make it look like that. And, but it wasn't easy because people didn't necessarily understand what we were going for. They're like, okay, this kind of looks cheesy 1990s. I'm like, no, it's cheesy 2400. Which is the year that we're going for, and it's like this is what space looks like, and matter of fact, Star Trek space, because it's just getting people to understand the difference between Star Wars, Star Trek, generic science fiction, what a ship should look like, and whatnot. It's a bit of a learning curve.
Absolutely, and another big difference that you have these days, as opposed to when we were kids and Star Trek was on air, was they were more episodic. There wasn't a real defined overarching plot throughout the whole season. Star Trek has always been known for its standalone episodes, but these days people expect that long, connected arc throughout the season. So they really benefited from those standalone episodes. Like, okay, well, I've got this idea. Let's throw that out there and see how that plays. And because the seasons were between 22 and 26 episodes, I mean, you could be in the middle of still producing that season and say, well, that didn't play, so change this here. But
exactly, yeah.
So when you got the call that you were going to be production designer on Star Trek Picard season 3, first of all, did your head go like this? And second, like what was your initial, like what was the inspiration you drew from to give us this more streamlined, sleek version of our Star Trek The Next Generation, but in the future?
Mm-hmm. Well, bonus, I got called and they said, we want you to design seasons 2 and 3. And we're shooting them back to back at the same time. So you really are going to be doing 20 episodes of Star Trek.
Really?
Yeah. So that's how that went. So, a lot of people don't, even though we've said it a number of times, it's like we finished shooting season 2 on a Friday, started season 3 on a Monday. So there was no because normally you take a 6-month break between seasons or whatever. We rolled right into the next one, which meant, as I'm sitting here trying to figure out Soong and the spaceship launching, and there's Borg running around in Picard's solarium and all that crazy stuff, we're also designing transporter rooms for season 3. So we were doing basically for the last half of season 2, we were doing season 3 as well. So it was all one on top of another. So it was very exciting, but it's like the season 2, in a lot of ways, it was kind of a primer because we built the bridge, which it was a Stargazer. We turned it into the Titan. But most of season 2 was running around Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't a ton of sci-fi stuff. So we had a little bit of sci-fi stuff, and then but we were getting up to speed, which was, it would have been better had it all been sci-fi, because then it would have been easier to shoot during a pandemic. But we had scenes with 200 extras at Disney Concert Hall, and there was a lot of big craziness in season 2.
Oh yeah.
So in a lot of ways, season 3 would have been easier to do because there were less locations and everything. But it was, but yeah. So, but my initial thing was we're not doing something completely new. It's like my inspiration was to look at Star Trek: The Next Generation and say, okay, this is what they did. This is why they did what they did. And here is a, look at a starship like a building. It's like this is what an elevator looks like. What did an elevator look like 20 years ago? That's how much evolution our turbo lift should have. It shouldn't look completely different. It shouldn't go in a, and I think one of our key inspirations was the transporter room. And we looked at that from not so much a design idea, but the idea that in the Star Trek movies, like Final Frontier and whatnot, it's the same exact transporter room that is used on The Next Generation. They used to just reuse the set sitting exactly where it was. The audience didn't care. No one went, oh my God, that's the worst thing in the world. They're like, they accept it because that's what a transporter room looks like. So we said, if in 100 years in universe, a transporter room isn't going to change its design, why would it change dramatically in 20 years? So that was really what our approach was. It's like, let's just not reinvent the wheel. Let's just bring it up to speed. So that was really our idea. And Terry liked the idea of going a little bit more retro. So we were, our design inspiration on that was the Dodge Challenger, which is if you look at a Dodge Challenger now and one from the 60s, it's the same. You get the same vibe for it. This one's just upgraded. It's newer, it's sleeker, it's got, but it still has that same feeling. So that was our overall design goal.
My favorite car, and I would love to have one in Nardo Gray. And now I'll just get custom plates that say Titan on it. That seems to make sense to me.
There you go.
It was an incredibly genius move. It is brilliant. It's so simple. It's brilliant because if you think about it, their technology is so advanced. It's almost the peak human technology. So their technological age isn't going to be every couple of months like ours is currently. It's growing substantially every day, but they have gotten to a point where, I mean, they can do virtually anything with technology. So of course it's not going to be having huge advancements every couple of months. It makes sense that certain things would remain the same design wise. That's absolutely brilliant. And it was a fantastic move. I mean, the transporter room is absolutely stunning. The ship itself, just visually stunning, but it doesn't take you out at all of that Star Trek universe. I will say there are some things in Discovery that it just feels so outside of Star Trek to me. And maybe it's my age. Maybe it's my age.
But everyone has different design aesthetics. It's like, the much talked about carpet conversation. It's like,
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I mean, walking into it, coming off of a lot of the people who had come off of Discovery, and they're like, no, dark, shiny floors where we can get reflections, and that's what they wanted. So there wasn't like a world in which I said, but what about carpet? It just wasn't going to go there. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to win some battles and lose some battles. The carpet one was a loss from the jump. So I'm like, okay. And that's the whole thing. I pick a paint color, how it's lit and everything. It's like, everyone has their different design aesthetic. And, if you look at, I'm more of a Tim Burton Batman type of person where I like the bright, I wanted my comic books to feel like a comic book. But,
absolutely.
If you look at the new Batman that just came out, people are like, oh my God, look at the hell. And I'm like, it's dark, it's thing. And so, it's like Game of Thrones. There was episodes of Game of Thrones that people were like, that's too dark. And it's like, we are in a world where people are cinephiles, if that's the word, who they tweak their TV and they sit in the dark room, they watch TV as if it's a cinema experience. Yeah. And if you do that, it's not as dark as everyone thinks. But if you're sitting in a bright room and whatever, it's going to look. So it's really a bit of a toss up on things, but I not really my thing. I as you can see in my drawings and what's on the thing, we put a ton of lights in there and how many they turn on and whatnot. It's really, but again, we were going for a cinematic feeling where it felt more like a Star Trek movie. And if you look at the Enterprise E bridge compared to the E was monumentally darker. Even when they shot the D bridge in Generations, it was darker. So it's a different feeling because again, how you shoot and do everything for TV is different than you do it for a feature.
And I'm glad you said that you wanted it to kind of feel more cinematic. And man, you guys nailed it. There were a few times a couple Trekker friends of mine were talking, and I said, I think, and this is going to sound weird, but I think this is my favorite Star Trek movie because it really felt that way. I mean, you guys nailed it. And
yeah, well, and that's another thing that people like in Hollywood. It's like no one wants to do a TV show.
Right.
It's like everyone wants to be doing movies. So even if you're doing a TV show, everyone it's like it's the movie. The movie ends here. The thing. It's like okay, it's an episode of a TV show, but everyone wants to, people, and that's why TV is really, really taken off. Is that we have all these big filmmakers coming to TV because they want to tell longer stories. Mm-hmm. They don't want to be tied to a 2-hour movie and whatever. And it's like, no, I want 10 hours. And that's really what Terry did with season 3 was it's a 10-hour movie, but broken up into really 3 different acts. If you take like the first 3 episodes and then the last 3 episodes and everything, it really tells a different story for each one, and you hit different moments. So,
well, it was beautifully done. I mean, all of you guys, everyone, cast, crew. I mean, really, just you can tell the passion that was put into this. You can absolutely tell that every single person who worked on this was a fan of the franchise and felt passionately about it and really wanted to deliver a love letter to other fans. It truly, truly is. I can't tell you how many times I got choked up watching it. Like
I've got probably 100 emails from fans who are like, "I'm sorry, I just had to write you a letter saying, this brought me to tears." And I think for me, it did something that was unexpected for people who didn't get what we were trying to do, and that was create a connection to the past. And not just our past and the characters' past, but the whole world as a whole. Because so many people like this brought me back to watching, Star Trek with my dad and my thing when this was our whole. And it's like that's what it was. It was a connection of us to our past, as much as it was a connection of Picard to his past and Riker to his past, and all of these characters that are like going, okay, where have we gone? What have we done? What is our adventure, and what does it all mean? And one by one, each bit is played out because it's Geordi and his daughters and Data, and it's like, yeah, each one, and then each character has their own arc. So it's like it's pretty cool.
Now I can 100% relate to that. This is something I was discussing with another friend of mine who works in special effects. That this kind of thing, how do I put this? When we were kids, it was the thing, like at least once or twice a week after dinner, you went to the living room or the family room and you watched a show together as a family. Mm-hmm. That was there. Everyone had like a show they watched with their family. For my brother, my father, and I, it was Star Trek: The Next Generation. 10 years ago, this April, I lost my little brother, Stephen. Mm-hmm. And when that first episode came out, I came into my studio and I watched it by myself, and I was just bawling. I was just bawling because you remember that feeling.
Yeah. And I think that's the key thing. It's like you remember that feeling. And I think there's a certain nuance that Terry and the writers hit, that because there's a lot, the term, the member berries, and that gets you used. And it's like, but it's literally, it's a brush that you have, you're like, okay, I can paint with member berries, but what are you doing with it and what are you saying with it? And it's
Right.
like, it's not just here's some nostalgia, and it's here's moments in time that gave us a feeling, and I'm going to pull those moments and give them to you so you remember that feeling. And that was what it was. It was 10 episodes of remembering the feeling of what it was like to enjoy Star Trek and to watch these characters again. And it was like going and visiting friends again.
Yes.
And it was the thing of going. I think that people said with Picard, just like season one, they were like, that didn't feel like Picard. It felt like, something different. And I'm like, I get it. And that was an exploration of, here's this guy Picard, and he is not the starship captain. He's not this. What would his life be like? And that was a version of that exploration. It wasn't what everyone expected, because they're like, no, we want him on the ship and doing the thing that we expected. And they're like, no, he's changed. And in a lot of ways, that was an important story to tell, because we've all gone off and done our own things. And it's that thing of going, that tied us back into what's happened, which is like, yeah, Picard has changed and he's done all these things, which is what allowed him to have that season 3 bit, because he's not the same captain. He is more vulnerable. He doesn't have all the right answers anymore. It's like, and there are, that thing, and everyone's a little bit more vulnerable, because you saw Riker, and like, he's like, I got a family and I've got a wife and I'm having struggles, and now I have to deal with this crisis, and am I up to the crisis, and am I going to make the right decision, and or are we going to screw it up after all these, we finally we thought we were cool and we're not, we're going to die. And
a lot of people, and maybe it is something that does come with age, this kind of knowledge, but back when TNG was on the air, they didn't really have families. They were each other's family. Now they each individually have something of their own to lose, and some have already suffered extreme loss, like Riker and Troy. They lost dad, they lost their son, and that changes you on a molecular level. And it just, you guys had the perfect blend of fan service and new adventure. It was just absolutely, you guys did almost too good of a job, because it showed us and the other franchises, like, yes, it can be done. It can be done.
Again, I think that, there's a lot of the shows on all the different networks and things. There's a lot of them that everyone's struggling to try and do the thing, which is, I want to do something new, different, but not too different, because again, it's like, I want to do something new and something completely different, because fans are like, oh, don't do the same old thing. It's like, I want to do something new and different. Then you're discovering, they're like, whoa, not that different. Too different. Yeah, it's like, well, we want the same, but not the same. And it's like, so it's really finding that balance of what it is that folks want. And again, I think that, shows like, for me, a good example of a show that really nails it is The Mandalorian, as far as the design standpoint, because I watch The Mandalorian and it looks exactly like Star Wars in 1977.
Yeah.
So there's no technological differences. They said, here's how you did it, here's what we did, and that's as far as technology goes. And which I just think is so well, they could have completely done something different. They're like, nope, this is the lane, and we stay in the lane. And I think that was kind of what I did with season 3. It's like, no, here's our lane. We don't need to. But you run into a lot. Star Trek has something that Star Wars doesn't, which is we age and we've traveled through time. Whereas Mandalorian is 1977.
Yeah.
So it's like, there's no technology difference, and whatever. People are like, okay, that's the tech. But now with us, we're like, well, we can't have a pad, because we know that we now have iPads that are the same thing, but in Next Generation, that was like, oh my God. And it's like the whole idea, it's like, and it's like, that's a cell phone. It's like, well, that's like a tricorder, and this and does it. But how do you have a tricorder be cooler than an iPhone when an iPhone would do everything that a tricorder does. And,
Right.
so you just run into that whole thing where it becomes, and, Star Wars is less of a gadgety thing. They just have a clunky piece of metal thing and you look at it and it does a whatever, but Star Trek is more, yeah. So, I mean, we ran into that somewhat in season 2. There was a scene where we had a young Picard, and it was supposed to be young Picard, and he was in his room working on something. We're like, okay, if he's in his room would have a computer. But what computer would it be? Would it be the square boxy thing that Kirk had on his desk? Because in our time frame of Star Trek, that would actually make the most sense.
Right.
But it makes absolutely no sense for reality, because that's not we're not imagining it in 300 years that's what they would have for computers. They'd have like some cool technological glass screen craziness, but that's not what they had in the 60s. So that this is what has been established. So it's you run into that a lot with all the technology, and how do we update it, how do we change it, how do we do it, and have stuff still look cool.
And I enjoyed season 2, and I'll tell you why. one letter, Q.
Yeah.
I was so stoked that Q came back and that he was brought back again the very end of season 3. Just my brain exploded.
Oh yeah.
But we had mentioned the carpet earlier, and I wanted to ask you, when the season was airing, and you would see comments about, why isn't there carpet on the Titan? Why isn't there carpet on the starships? Were you guys kind of giggling a little bit that
line was in the script? Oh yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. That I think I tweeted about it. I'm like, that's like the longest joke ever in history, because that was we finished shooting almost a year and a half ago. So and then season 2 hadn't aired. So then everyone watches season 2, complains about the carpets, and I'm like, okay, you get it. And it's like, it's in there. The joke there's a payoff to the joke. And it's like, and I think that's one of the reasons why Terry wrote it. It's like, because we all miss that certain design aesthetic. And it's like, and yeah, so it was such a fun little nod to it. But yeah.
So design wise, like when you were building, the actual transporter room and the corridors and everything, in Star Wars, because we were talking about that a moment ago, they'll need like a communicator, and they'll see something like a lipstick or whatever, like what kind of looks like it, just slap some paint on it, use that. I know for the stuff I do for this channel, I repurpose a lot. Did you repurpose things you saw often, or here and there, or was it mostly like, buy the materials, we'll build it, we'll make it ourselves?
It was a mixture, because I think that part of the evolution in the last, say, 5 to 10 years in our world is that you have things like 3D printers and all that custom, and you're like, oh, we'll custom make it. So you get a set design, and people are like, well, what's the gack on either side of the turbo lift door? I'm like, I don't know. It's go to Home Depot, buy a bunch of stuff, glue it together, and whatever. And people are like, well, or you'll get it. They're like, well, I need a concept guide to do me a drawing. They do a drawing, and they're like, okay, well, that doesn't look like anything that I know what. I'm like, well, but just go to the place that has the old aircraft parts and find something that looks kind of like it, glue it on, and whatever. So there's a little bit of that. We see a little bit of that in the a lot of it, because Kit came on, and Kit did a lot of that on in the Borg set. If here's one to make people's heads explode, because the old if you like the old things that sit above the Borg's head,
the alcove,
there's like a round thing, so that was a beehive hair dryer. Something
I'm quite familiar with. I'm a hairstylist.
So yeah, there was, if you look at it, the old ones were the old beehive hairstylist thing that they took, and then they made a mold of it, and it was like, and then you look at it, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah. And we went and looked for that model of the thing, and they were like, we couldn't find the one that we wanted. And then Kate came up with this, and he shows me this thing, and he had it painted black, and I'm like, yeah, that's pretty cool. What is that? And he goes, it's a Christmas tree stand. So if you look at it, if you go and look at the board thing, they're all just inverted Christmas tree stands. It's like,
Fantastic. I love
you,
stuff like that.
yeah. So there was a fair amount of that, and then but again, if you look at the if you look at the sets, they're a little bit more newer, glossier. There wasn't a lot of, we didn't get into the dark and dingy type of other worlds, but I'd say like the District 6 stuff had a lot of that, where like Sneed's Lair, there was like these arched columns that had these cool lights in them, and the lights were just planters from Home Depot that you put on your lawn, and it was used to break up the grass or something like that. It was just like, okay, find me a shape that will look cool that we can put some light in, and so we played around with it and had a lot of fun with it.
What was the inspiration for District 6? The aesthetic.
There was a clip that we had seen of it was a presentation piece that they did for Blade Runner, the new Blade Runner.
Oh yeah.
And there was Dave Bautista walking through these alleyway. And again, we had done something similar in season 2, where we meet Elnor, and he's in he's supposed to be in Okinawa in the alternate universe, and he wakes up there, and it's all kind of and they love that. Sets them up there. They're like, well, let's just do that, but in a much larger scale. And then we wanted each alien race to have their own little quadrant. So we had a Ferengi area here, and we had Orions over here, and but then it seems simple, but you're designing all these spaces, and we're like, okay, and you let everyone know, it's like, okay, we have the Orions over here, we have the Tellarites over here, we have this. And then you get there and you're like, okay, where are the Orions? And they're like, oh, I'm like, you don't have an Orion shopkeeper? And they're like, no, we have Orion dancing girls. And I go, right, but who's manning? We have this whole shop that's Orion writing and Orion things.
This place.
Yeah, who's running this place? And they're like, yeah, no one's gonna notice that. And I'm like, oh, and there was a lot of that, because it was, what was interesting is that there was such a difference in season 1. Because of the storytelling in there and the adventure they went on, there wasn't a ton of things to tie back. You look at La Serena, it wasn't really a Federation ship, so it didn't need to look like a Federation ship. They didn't go to certain places, so they didn't need to look like anything. So a lot of people were like, people won't notice. It's not that big of a deal. It's like, and they did some fan service, so they're like, here's your fan service, and here's this idea. And again, I think that season 1 is really brilliant, and I think it has a lot of interesting things. But it was just it was a different version of Star Trek. So for season 3, we're like, here we go. Here's your exact Star Trek, and it does need to match. And it's just getting people on the board with, registration number. And like it becomes like a thing, because now you see it. It's like, oh, each little blip on the screen has a registration number, and it's in a name, and I'm like, all that matters to people. And there's entire books and websites donate, and people, like, when we're shooting the show, you're like, why are you so concerned about the numbers? I go, because fans are going to look at those numbers. They're going to have it all figured out, and each one has to match to this. These registration numbers go to these class of ships, and it all has to be figured out. And people like, no one's going to notice that stuff. I'm like,
do they not watch YouTube? There are whole channels, people who get paid to find that stuff and show it to other people. This is what we're known for.
Yep. Well, and again, a lot of it, it's like the Easter eggs and stuff. It's the thing. It's like, here's Easter eggs, but then I go, yeah, but then there's the next layer of stuff that you need to know. It's like we a lot of times the director would say to me, what's the thing I'm supposed to put in front of the camera? So like an Easter one thing. Or I'd walk out of the room and they put something in front of the camera that I'm like, oh no, that's supposed to be like a background. You don't really look, because we had that happen with the Bajoran tablet, and they did the teaser trailer for season 2, and they did the shot like panning right across it, and the pandemonium blew up there. Oh my God, they're gonna bring back Cisco, and I'm like, yeah. Yeah, I'm like, I didn't plan that. So
So speaking of the Easter eggs and stuff, this was actually the very next question I was going to ask you. Like, how did you decide which ones to put in and where? And like, was there a specific like why? Like, okay, I want this to be right here, and this is my reason for it.
absolutely not. And it was more the thing of going, and we started kind of with Picard's chateau. In season 1, he had his like archives where he had all of his stuff, and I thought, well, why would Picard do that? Like, he has a big mansion. Why wouldn't he just have his stuff at his house? It seems like seemed weird. So I said, what if we bring all that stuff back and we kind of put it in his library?
Mm-hmm.
And we don't treat these things like Easter eggs. They're just his life.
Mm-hmm.
And you go, we all have items in our past that, the things that, the Iron Man helmet behind you and the R2. I go, these are things that you've kept throughout, your life, and you hold on to it. And the fact that I may have gone to your house 10 years ago and seen the R2D2, and it's still there. And it's like, here are these things that these are part of his life and then part of his house. So we went through, the episodes in Next Generation. We're like, okay, well, these items were seen in Picard's family house before, put those back in, because we want to tie the idea that he has some attachments to things of the past, because he does. He has the photo album, and this is who he is. So once you do that, then you start creating it, and then you realize there's 80 things behind me that were in episodes of Star Trek, because those are the things that he saved, and those were part of his past. So then, as you go on, the camera ends up seeing things, and you go, oh, that's the thing from this, and that's, and then you just put it in there. And the same thing with any set that you would go into. It's like, okay, well, what would Sneed have in his back and in the on his shelves? And he's like, well, he collects old things. He says, well, let's have, in the original Star Trek series, they had these white tube things, and that it was in sick bay and all these things. And you're like, what the hell is that? And it's like, it's actually a mute for a trumpet. And you're like, but they just use it as like funky decor. And we're like, yeah, get some of those, and put them in these, so that all these things, it feels like he's collecting old relics from Star Trek, but they're really what would be an old relic in his world. So, and then we just kind of layer all that stuff in, and then let the camera find it when it finds it. And sometimes it's, right on it, and sometimes it's something that you have to see in the background, or sometimes you don't see it at all, and you're like, oh, that was a great thing. Like we had Geordi's desk when we first see him on the view screen, and it was like the desk was just filled with stuff, and behind him had tons of stuff, and then you see the shot on the view screen, and it's like this, and you couldn't see anything, and they're like, oh, well, we had a lot of cool stuff. But then they had the Ready Room episode where Geordi called me to actually LeVar called me to set. He's like, oh my god, I can't believe you put this thing and did this, and which was really nice. But yeah, so sometimes you see it, sometimes you don't. But you put it in there because he is Geordi's a historian. He has a museum, so he would be surrounded by museum artifacts. So that only makes sense.
It does. It sounds so common sense. It's brilliant. It feels like in a time we live in where common sense is kind of a commodity.
Yeah.
That is just absolute brilliance. I mean, the Zephram Cochrane statue.
Yep.
On his desk. Of course he would have that. He met Zephram Cochrane and told him about that because it was at his high school.
And then someone was like, well, why would he have a copy? Why would he have Kirk's copy of A Tale of Two Cities?
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, that's an easy one. And they said, well, okay. I go, well, that's so I can have a screen used copy of A Tale of Two Cities sitting on my bookshelf. Like that was an easy one. I'm like, there's only two. I have one now. So
my favorite part for the nostalgia, the Easter eggs, was when they were inside the
Daystrom.
When they were inside Daystrom. Kirk's body is there.
It is.
Do we know why?
Yep. I think. Well, the question is, did you see the new Roddenberry Ochoy Archives piece that was released last week?
No, I did not.
Okay, so you and your viewers will have to go watch it. So the Roddenberry,
Oh yes, yes, I did see that.
yeah,
Yes, I did with Spock and the
with
bat.
Spock, yeah. And so the whole question is with that one is from the actor himself to the fans to the thing, we didn't get the closure we all wanted, and I
Right.
think that as a cultural experience, that is something that we all feel. We don't feel that we got the closure, and I think William Shatner, because we did this great piece and we rebuilt his captain's chair and everything, but he said he's like, yeah, I wanted it to come off like what it was a good ride and it was thing, and he didn't even feel that he landed his death scene, and like we're all like going, is that really how Kirk died?
Yeah, it was kind of like I'm just gonna say it felt kind of weak for how.
Yeah. So I think that a lot of fans of this, and then to the extent that William Shatner himself wrote a book where someone goes and resurrects his body and he has a whole thing off it. So that's a whole book that he wrote. So it's not like, so people are like, oh my God, you're shitting on Shatner. And I'm like, the dude wrote a book where pretty much that whole kind of idea happens. So it's the idea that it was just for fans to sit there and go, maybe it didn't. Maybe that's not the end of the story. Will there ever be a continuation? Who knows? But it was like for us going, in Star Trek, you're never really dead, and that's the thing going, all you do is you put that in there and you go, yeah, they did bring Picard back and they did bring Spock back and the thing, and you're like,
and the Genesis device is in the Daystrom.
Yeah.
Too.
So it just says, and that was what it was intended to do. It just sit there and go, guys, there's always possibilities. And it was almost like a note to saying to friends going, we're all on the same page. Can we all agree that shouldn't have been the end? And we're just going to put a to be continued, figure it out later. Maybe so, in another 10 years when they can digitally make another Captain Kirk and whatever. But again, the Roddenberry people just showed that they can do Spock again. So again, I think it's all tied into that whole idea that, the story may continue.
My favorite episode of Star Trek ever is Trials and Tribulations on Deep Space Nine. And when they're walking through there and Worf sees the attack tribble and it scares the shit out of him. That was one of my hands down favorite bits of the whole show, because I just keep thinking back to him talking about, the great tribble wars, and that was hilarious.
And again, I think that was another thing that Terry brought back to the show was the humor. There was a lot more humor, and not like jokey humor, because I thought that in season 2, us going into the past, there could have been more of it, and because I think that was why the voyage home was so successful. It was like it was like seeing our friends have fun, and it's like it was serious but not so serious, because Kirk's son just died and Spock died and this, and all of a sudden we got Spock back and everything, and I think it was Shatner who said or Nimoy, because he directed, he's like, yeah, we want to do a caper, and it's like let's have fun with it, and let's just and I think that was, but season 2 was that idea, but very serious, so there wasn't a lot of I said I'm just standing there, I go, okay, I'm giving it to you, just hit the softball pitch. They're at the party and someone says the Cardassians are here, and they all freak out. They're like, the Cardassians are here, and it's like, no, they're horrible. They're in a totally different way. And I'm like Cardassi, and it's like it's a lamp, guys. Just hit it. Now trust you, and they never did it. And it's like,
well, there's been this meme ever since memes were pretty much invented that said, in a world full of Kardashians, be a Cardassian.
Yeah.
And I always thought that was so funny. It was when you walk through Daystrom and you see all these things, Kirk's body, the Genesis device, the Borg device from Nemesis, um, Data's body, with actual prop bodies from the Nemesis movie, it was almost heartwarming. I mean, it's sci-fi, but at the same time, you're like, oh, there's that. And I remember that. That's just so great. But when the Enterprise comes out,
oh yeah,
they get on the bridge. I mean, everyone I know just cried. And we we did a show where we talked about a live show where we talked about how Picard saved Trek, and we all agreed that the reason why we felt so emotional when we saw that come out, because it was like seeing this lifelong old friend you hadn't seen in years, and they show back up and you remember why you were such good friends. And it just beautifully done. I mean, even the wood grain was just perfectly matched. I'd be bravo.
yeah.
Just
Yeah. And Liz, she was the spearhead of that project, because we had so many things going on. Like I would just be the main designer, and then I had people who would head up all the, yeah. So Liz was head, and she was just like every nuanced screen capture from this episode. Oh, it looks like this does this, and matching the paint colors, doing the things, and just getting everyone and that was the main thing, getting everyone excited about it, because you can sit there and build something, or you could get excited about it. And the more excited, and we had this giant mood board that showed all the different details, and it got the people who are building it, and painting and everything to get excited, because they're creating a museum quality piece, and they saw how much passion we were putting into doing it. They're like, oh, I have to get it exactly right. We're like, yes, you do. It has to be right. And they're like, no. And then it became like a challenge for everyone. It's like, oh, we're not just building it, we're building exactly right. And let's do the thing. And then when watching the cast come, and I think that they're saving it for the DVD to get people, with the Blu-ray, to get people to buy it. But we obviously, everyone in there had their cameras rolling when the cast walked onto the bridge the first time, and it was just like,
I'm gonna visit.
Yeah.
Well, you guys, it really came through the screen. The excitement, the passion, the love you have for the property, you can really feel that. We feel it, especially with how interactive you and Terry and is it George? Am I pronouncing that correctly? The researcher?
George, yeah.
George. Your interaction with the fans on Twitter, on social media, it connected the fan base with the actual crews in ways I've never seen before. It made us feel a part of it. And I mean, this season has been a nerdy experience that I really have nothing else to compare to. You guys made it feel like we made this with you. It was made with us, and for you guys. It was just phenomenal. And
in reality, it was a bunch of, it was more old school. It was a bunch of getting a bunch of friends together who love something, who have a passion for something, and doing it. And let's do something fun and cool, and then let's get all of our friends back together. And it's like, if you were to sit there and go, well, let's do this, and how cool would it be if we could do this? Well, let's do it. Well, how cool would it be if we brought back the Enterprise? Okay. But no, the whole thing, would rebuild it all. And we put Picard on it and Riker on it and do it on the thing. And then we go and fight the Borg. Yeah, that sounds like fun. Let's do that. And you're like, okay, let's get Paramount to give us some money, and we'll go and do it. And then we did. And it was just to have that happen. And it's like, I think, as a filmmaker, your goal, your dream is to sit there and do something that connects with the fans and that people love, and that you connect with them emotionally. And for me, as a lifetime Star Trek fan, to have that project that like the pinnacle of my career happen to be a Star Trek thing and happen to nail it, when given the thing. It's like, here you go, you got one shot, do Star Trek, but don't fuck it up. And it's like, yeah, and you're like, okay, well, we technically had two chances, but but it was actually, from our standpoint, it was kind of hard because we did do season 2 and season 3 back to back, and season 2 didn't get the reception of season 3. But it was hard for us when we're doing it because we're like, oh, well, we thought it was really good, and we know that season 3 is really good, but maybe it's not. Maybe it sucks. And the whole time that season 2 is going on, we're like, did we screw up? Did we really drop the ball? And then season 3, becomes this gigantic thing. We're like, and so I think for me, a lot of people are like, well, season 2 sucked. And I go, for a lot of us, it was really one big thing that had a bunch of story arcs and things. So, but that's why I give Terry all the credit for writing season 3 and doing whatever. It's like, we're just a vessel for his greatness, and you tell us what to build, we'll build cool things. I think we did fun stuff in season 2, but it was not spaceshipy fun adventure stuff. It was,
I really hope he gets to hear you say that you're just a vessel for his greatness.
He'll pay me $5 if I say that. Yeah. So,
well, I mean, just this whole season, I really enjoyed season 2. It was wonderful seeing John Delancey back. He was one of my hands down favorite aspects of The Next Generation. Him and Worf. Oh, Worf. And seeing him back, and then going into season 3 and getting the entire crew back, and then him coming back to start harassing Picard's son for probably his entire lifetime. He's like, wait, I thought you were dead. He's like, oh, you're so linear. Like, that's
and again, that line is the brilliance. And I liken that line of Q to Worf's line in Trial and Tribulations, where it's like when he sees when they see the old Klingons that have no we do not speak. It's like, boom, throw the line away and then walk it. We're not going to explain it. You're not going to do the thing. It's just, oh, you humans think so linearly, and then it's like, and we're moving on because we're just going to not talk about it. And that's, and I just think that sometimes that's the best thing. It's like, you're like, is Q really dead? Is anybody, and that's really what I think, that there was a lot of that tone in, and everyone's joking on about Shaw, and it's like, is Shaw dead? It's like, or not, it's like, but again, I think if no one dies, there's no stakes, but also in the same thing, it's, it's the idea of like, okay, well, Q's back. But if you look at it across the board, I would say that 99% of the people, when they saw Q back, they're like, yes. No one went, oh my God, that doesn't align with it. It's like, no,
it's not canon.
Yeah. Then it's like, wait, he died. It's like, yeah, and so does Spock. But again, it's
watched any like sci-fi or supernatural shows. Look at you die just means you get more work.
Yeah. Denise Crosby died, and then she kept on coming back and everything. Oh. And we were gifted to have her. So
really, one of my speculations was that Sela was involved. Tasha Yar's half Romulan daughter. I was really hoping to see that. I'm like, okay, well, maybe in Star Trek Legacy.
Yeah. Well, again, it opens the door. It's, unfortunately, it's a unique thing because coming off of season 2 where the ratings weren't great, I don't think that maybe the network was. I don't think anyone expected Picard season 3 to explode as big as it did. It came out of nowhere, and then it kept on going and going and going and going. And I think that the ratings haven't. I think the last ratings that they had was for like episode 4. So we haven't even gotten to the finale yet. Ratings because it takes so long to. But I think people are going to see that. Wow, we actually did something really special.
We did.
And unfortunately, we just got slapped in the face with a writer's strike, which means there aren't phone calls going to Terry to, hey, start writing a new thing, because obviously that's not a thing. So it's going to put a damper on everything. But hopefully, it takes a while to even though fans want it,
Mhm.
Star Trek is set up on Paramount with, they've got 5 shows at 10 hours a piece. That's 50 weeks of programming. So that's a year. So there's really no slot to drop in another show. But on the flip side, you look at all the Yellowstones and things going, well, there's more than one night a week and thing. If
Yeah.
fans want it, maybe it's something worth looking at. I think that's where the world is right
I
now.
agree with you. Listen, Paramount, stop being cowards and just create an entire Star Trek network. I'm just saying.
Yep.
It would go over quite well.
Yep.
And you can start off with, Star Trek Legacy.
I think everyone would love to see that. So.
Oh, absolutely. The way the finale went, it's just a perfect transition. It really leaves it open. And I have my fingers and what toes I have crossed that not only does this writer strike come to a mutually beneficial resolution, but quickly, hey, you guys can get to work. Yeah, Mule.
Yep.
Get to work on Star Trek Legacy already.
Well, we all hope it, and then we all, it's also that thing of, Hollywood is it's a job, so it's like it's that thing of going, because I know that Terry had he just did a pilot for Escape from Witch Mountain for Disney, and he did that right before Christmas. So what happens if Disney calls and says, "Oh, we want that," and he's like, "Oh, okay, I want to do Legacy, but Disney's opening their paychecks and
we all know when the mouse calls and you've signed something for them, you better go."
Yep. So, but like I said, then that becomes that, especially after a writer's strike or an extended time off, everyone's looking for their next thing. So hopefully it'll all align and we'll get the band back together again.
Well, I truly, truly hope so. And so do millions of people all over the world, because you guys have completely just revived, reinvigorated, and respected one of the most beloved franchises in all of cinema history. And I salute you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me on your show.
Absolutely. Thank you for putting up with me, and thank you for joining me today. This has been an absolute treat for me. You've allowed me to nerd out on one of my favorite things ever. And I hope I see you around in the Twitterverse again soon, and we could chat more sometime.
That would be awesome. Thank you so much for having me. And,
right,
and hopefully your viewers can harass me online and ask me silly questions about registration and this class and that class, and I'll see if I can come up with a good answer.
I'll put his information down below for Twitter, so make sure you follow him. He always has some fantastic tidbits every day. He's posting something, and let me tell you something. I've never seen anyone else in this industry that is so approachable and is so happy to talk with you about the things you love as Dave, because he loves it too. So make sure you follow. Oh, no. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Hope to see you back for Star Trek Legacy.
Hashtag Star Trek Legacy. Alex, let's make this happen. All right, guys. Have a great night. Live long and prosper.
You do it left-handed.